Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, July the 14th, 2025. So it is Happy Birthday France. So 236 years ago, it was the storming of the Bastille. And in this video, I want to look at France, look at a few charts relevant to France. For example, the chart of the Fifth Republic. Also, it would be a great time to have another look at the horoscope of Emmanuel Macron, the French president. But before I look at France, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching for today, which is Monday, July the 14th, 2025. So here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. And, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So turning to this chart, we see that the moon is in Pisces, very much in Pisces. So at noon in New York today, the moon is at 9 degrees 9 Pisces. And in fact, it went into Pisces at 0:45 this morning, just after midnight London time. So, if you are in Europe, the Americas, Africa, most of Asia, it really is a Pisces day. Now, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the first part of the day, the moon might be in Aquarius. So, as far as the main aspects are concerned, there isn't actually a great deal going on. The moon in Pisces, well, the first thing that happens when it moves into Pisces, it makes a square to Uranus. So, that square to Uranus can be somewhat unpredictable, though it's perhaps more of relevance if you're in Australia or New Zealand. If you're in the Americas or Europe, perhaps it's not quite so important. And additionally, the moon makes a trine to Jupiter. And arguably, that's the main aspect of the day. Moon in Pisces, moon in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer. Things are really very active there, but not in a dynamic way. Moon trine Jupiter is quite an easygoing aspect, and we do have the moon and Jupiter, of course, in a mutual reception, because the moon is in Jupiter's sign in Pisces, and Jupiter is in the moon sign. So that trine between the moon and Jupiter is really quite fortunate. And so for many of us, things will be moving, and there could be an emotionality to today, which we might have been missing sort of over the weekend. But now it's there. The moon is in Pisces, and having made this trine to Jupiter, it makes a square to Venus. Moon square Venus, well, it's nice perhaps that the moon is aspecting the benefics. First it makes a trine to Jupiter, then it makes a square to Venus, but you could argue that that is a little indulgent. We might know when to stop. It might be rather gushing, and so it's great to be emotional, but we don't want to be too emotional, and we don't want to take anything too far. So that's the broad picture for today, New York time. Just quickly look at what's going on in sort of Sydney, Australia. So Sydney, Australia, this is set for noon. And this is, of course, a representative of Australasia. And you see that the moon is at 1 degree 16 Pisces at noon. So that means that this morning, especially if you're in New Zealand, which is of course ahead of Australia, then there is going to be a time in the day when the moon is in Aquarius, so late Aquarius. So perhaps perhaps today will have a slow start, as the moon is in late Aquarius. It's void, of course, in Aquarius, so nothing much going on. And then there is that changeover late morning around then when the moon moves into Pisces. It starts making a square to Uranus, and the activity starts. And so that's the geocentric picture, turning to the heliocentric view. Here it is. So that is not quite the heliocentric view because I need to switch the coordinate system to heliocentric. There it is. So there is the heliocentric view. The Earth is at 2228 Capricorn, making a square to Chiron. And so, Earth square Chiron, many of us may feel that we want to do something different. We don't want to just do what everyone expects of us. And perhaps it's important for us to get attention. It might matter. We might perhaps feel that we're being ignored. And if we're talking about being ignored, there is the wound. And so Earth square Chiron, we want to make an impact. And maybe we can make an impact, but we don't want to take things too far. Also, Mercury is making a sextile to Mars. It's quite a wide sextile to Mars, but we might still feel it. Mercury sextile Mars is about having things to say and people having things to say. And it's a sextile, so it's not a square or an opposition, so it's an easygoing aspect. So if we want to speak with dynamism and authority, perhaps we can. So now it's time to look at things from a viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, which is Monday, July the 14th, 2025. Aries. The moon is now in Pisces, and with the moon in Pisces, it might be time to kind of limit your horizons. You don't have to be all over the place. You don't have to be always taking the initiative, always being in the center of things. There comes a point where you maybe just need to relax and review the situation. And the moon in Pisces, it is making a trine to Jupiter, and that trine to Jupiter can actually be quite beneficial if you handle the trine in the right way. It's about concentrating on things that matter to you, not that matter to anyone else. And you don't have to be out there doing things to take advantage of the moon trine Jupiter. In fact, there may be things you can do, at home, which are fairly innocuous, low profile. They may even feel rather boring, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't benefit from them. And so your actions today, could create a degree of stability, and stability does matter. Some Arians, even though it's not a time for taking action, they might feel some sort of tension that something has to happen. They'd like something to happen. They'd like to make something happen, but they can't. And so, that could be frustrating. And it's especially frustrating if you think that there's something you're missing. There's some great venture you should be involved in. There's some area of your life where you should be super active. Well, Aries, I think you're kidding yourself. There's nothing that has to be done. And even if you are feeling tense, that doesn't mean you have to act on that tension. Perhaps you need to ground this tension, and the best way to do that would be just to doing things that you're familiar with, perhaps even enjoying what you're familiar with, and not looking for too much excitement. And then in your own quiet way, it can be actually quite a satisfactory day. Now, one aspect we do have involving relationships is a square between the moon and Venus. And with that moon square Venus, it's possible that you find another person sort of irritating. Perhaps they're talking too much. And this is a reminder that actually you quite enjoy your own company right now. Well, it could be that someone is talking too much, or they are expressing ideas that you disagree with. They're almost baiting you to react, not necessarily deliberately baiting you, but you feel that you have to react. And really, it's not a time for reacting. And whatever someone says within reason, you probably should just ignore it and allow the situation to develop. Taurus. Taurus, you are feeling in a relatively good mood, I think. You can see what is possible. And I think that is very important. Sometimes Taurus can be rather stuck. You think about what you want and what you wanted in the past, and the past continues into the present, and the present continues into the future, and there's no change. But right now, Taurus, I think you are more flexible. Now, part of that might be to do with the fact that Venus is in Gemini. So Venus, your ruler in Gemini, a double-bodied sign, and so that means that you are aware at the moment of different possibilities, and you know that you shouldn't be stuck to any one course of action, and that you can have a standby plan. And as well, Taurus, you do see you do see possibilities out there. You are quite enthusiastic, and you can take something that doesn't seem to have any prospects, and you can transform it. And how you're able to transform it is just through your positivity. And you can be positive, and this can also be reflected in what you say. So when you say things today, do make an effort to be positive, to focus on the positive. It's always easy to be negative and to be gloomy and to say that things are just going to move from bad to worse. And I'm all in favour of being gloomy. I'm all in favour of negativity, and it's great. I mean, I really do believe in the power of negative thinking. But right now, there is room for being positive and to perhaps consider something which may on the surface have no chance of realization. You think it's got no chance of realization, so your first inclination is to say nothing. But maybe you should continue through with it. Allow yourself to be optimistic. Allow your mind to wander in a positive direction, and perhaps express this optimism to other people. And I think that you can actually have quite a powerful impact. And some people might need your optimism. Right now there is some tension in the air, and I was talking about this tension when I was doing the horoscope, or doing the reading for Aries. And this tension is around, but it's not your tension. It might be other people's tension. People seem nervous. They'd like something to happen, but it's not happening. And so what do you do? Well, it's possible, Taurus, but you can actually engage other people's nervousness, other people's tension, and reframe it. And perhaps you can change their mind and get them to realize that things are actually okay after all. So, overall, Taurus, I would have said today that you can be a force for good, and try not to spend all day alone, because I think when you're in company with other people, you can really have quite a powerful and fortunate impact on things. So don't doubt yourself, and the world needs you. Gemini, don't forget that Mercury, your ruler, is slowing down. Later in the week it does go retrograde, and it's possible that you're already starting to feel this slowdown. You'd like things to be moving quickly. I mean, after all, you're a Gemini, but are they? And you're now starting to see things in a different way. It's almost like time is slowing down, and you have a chance to evaluate things, and you're looking back at the past and you're thinking, well, have you done a good job? Maybe you need to go over things again. So these are the kind of thoughts that you should be thinking about. And therefore it's important that you're careful when considering new projects, because Mercury goes retrograde. I think it's on Friday. Mercury goes retrograde towards the end of a week, and so with Mercury retrograde, you might change your mind about something. So that means, Gemini, in the run up to Mercury stationing, it's important probably not to commit yourself. Yet, Gemini, there is a trine between the Moon and Jupiter today, and I think it's a great trine, this Moon Jupiter. The Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception with one another. Moon is in Pisces, which is Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter is in Cancer, which is its Moon sign. So that means that you do have a certain amount of luck, and this is especially the case if you're trying to achieve something. So if there's something you want to sort out and you want to establish your particular view, then now might be a great time to do it. I understand that Mercury is about to go retrograde, but that doesn't mean that you should be worrying about it obsessively, especially now, Monday, beginning of a week. And Moon trine Jupiter could be that you can just sort something out, perhaps in a work sense. There could also be a financial element to Moon trine Jupiter. Jupiter in Cancer, in Cancer until next year, until, was it June of next year? Jupiter in Cancer, I think, for Geminis could be about financial good fortune. And now the Moon making a trine to Jupiter, it could be a time when you can find ways of making new money. Or it could be that if you're dealing with money in a career or professional setting, that you're going to be particularly effective, and probably are going to be relatively persuasive. You give the impression of knowing what you're talking about when it comes to money. But it may not just be about money. It's also about you making progress, and you really can make progress. And this might actually be a sort of a last burst of activity before Mercury goes retrograde. And there's just so much you can sort out over the next few days. But particularly today and tomorrow, when the Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. So Gemini, really do, take advantage of that opportunity. And, as far as relationships are concerned, the Moon is trine Jupiter. Money aside, it's just a pleasant aspect, and it just could allow you to, just get on with someone in a broad sense. It might also give you an opportunity to demonstrate to another person how responsible you are. Now, sometimes Geminis have a reputation for being irresponsible, or for being inconsistent, or for changing their mind. But, that's not the way it works for every Gemini. And you've got to look at the overall chart. And as far as today is concerned, you may actually give the impression that you are a safe pair of hands and that you can be trusted. Cancer, it looks like being a pretty good day. The Moon is in Pisces. It's a water sign. You're a water sign. And so you feel that things are moving, things are working. And better still, the Moon is not just in Pisces, but it's making a trine to Jupiter. And Jupiter, of course, is in Cancer. It's in your sign. And the Moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. So that does give you, a great deal of luck. So if you try your hand at something, there's a very good chance that it will work, and good luck will be on your side. And so what is it you want to do today? If you want to do something and you've had your doubts in the past, put those doubts to one side in most cases, and it is an opportunity to see things in a new way. You haven't got all the answers, and if you want to do some exploration, now might be a great time to do it, because you're gonna know what to do, and something will be looking after you. And there could well be a spiritual side to today, tuning into something which is beyond you, and it's there, it's real, and it's certainly a favourable influence. So so Cancer, really, make the most of the day. Don't be distracted by irrelevant concerns. That is possible. I mean, the moon is making a square to Venus, and so with moon square Venus, you might be tempted to do something that you just know is not the right thing to be doing. You just know that it's a waste of time. You might enjoy it, but you know it's just plain indulgence. And so if something is indulgent or is a waste of time and isn't getting you anywhere, it might be a conversation. It might be a conversation with someone who, and you know this conversation is just going to be half an hour of nonsense, half an hour of indulging another person, and it's not going to get you anywhere. It's not going to get anyone else anywhere. So avoid time wasters and avoid activities that you know are a waste of time, but you might enjoy them anyway. And if you can do that, if you can get your priorities right, then yeah, as I said at the beginning, it looks like being a really great day for you. Leo, a lot of the work happens behind the scenes. You don't have to be out there in the wide world being seen and heard. Absolutely not. You can do things in your own way, on your own. You don't need much in the way of support or encouragement, and you therefore can be relatively secretive, and it's not a day for advertising yourself. Now, that might not be in keeping with the standard Leo approach. You might be of the opinion that you do need to be in the center of things, and that's fine, but you have to understand what's going on today, and it's all about taking the energies and using them in the best possible way. And so, Leo, if you can be quite serious and perhaps try to tune into your emotions. You do have powerful emotions. Okay, Leo is not a sign that has a reputation for being super emotional. It's a fire sign, not a water sign. But right now, with the moon in Pisces making a trine to Jupiter, you can really pick up on a lot of things, and your feelings are they are finely tuned. But if you want to understand what is happening around you, then you shouldn't be in the center of things. Now, you might think that you should be. You might think that if you are in the center of things, then you are where the action is, and also you can pick up on what is going on. But in this case, it's not true, because by separating yourself, you give yourself the opportunity of having some, or finding some, objectivity. And this moon trine Jupiter, it's a great aspect. It's a great aspect for everyone, and you just have to know how to use it in a way that works best for you. And for you, it is about keeping a relatively low profile, and at the same time, you don't have to shut up. You certainly have things to say and things to think about, but you don't have to tell it to everyone. You don't have to shout. You don't have to make speeches. It's all about finding the right niche for yourself and feeling good about yourself, and not having too many expectations. So, Leo, luck is certainly on your side, but it's a luck that has to be searched for, and it certainly can't be found in the obvious places. In fact, if you're looking for luck, if you're looking for an opportunity, then Leo, you could say that really it's right in front of you. You don't have to move anywhere. You don't have to go socializing or be frenetically active, and that's absolutely not necessary. So, that is the broad picture today. Leo, don't be afraid of exploring areas that you're not familiar with, but exploring them in your own way. I'm not talking about going out into the world to explore them, just exploring things, thinking about things, not just listening to your feelings, but there may be a spiritual element to it. You're getting insights, and if you want to make the most of those insights, Leo, then you need some quiet. Virgo, Mercury is your ruler, and we do have to consider what Mercury is doing. Mercury right now is at 15 degrees 5 minutes Leo. I mean, at least at noon New York time, that's where it is. And so with Mercury in that position, there's quite a lot you can say, because Mercury is sesquiquadrate the Aries point. So with Mercury sesquiquadrate the Aries point, what is happening in the world is important to you, and I think that you can get noticed. Even if you're not trying to get noticed, though, that nothing lasts forever, and you don't want to get caught up in things, and that's because Mercury is slowing down. Mercury is getting ready to go retrograde on Friday. I think Mercury goes retrograde, and so perhaps you should be thinking about what it means for Mercury to go retrograde. There may be things that you've been working on, you feel that you're just ready to move forward with them, but maybe you should prepare for a delay. And Mercury does go retrograde for 3 weeks. So Mercury goes retrograde on I think it's Friday. Yeah, Friday. I think it's Friday the 18th. And it stays retrograde until around August the 11th. Of course, August the 9th, 10th, 11th. This is a date that everyone is getting very excited about. August. I think there's a full moon on August the 9th, which is pretty dramatic, and Mars is making an opposition to Saturn. Yeah, but there's a load going on August the 9th, and 9th, well, okay, in August, the 11th is when Mercury stations, but that might be something to, I won't say look forward to, but something just to be aware of. And so it could be, Virgo, that if you are planning on doing something very short term, let me rephrase that. If you're trying to do something dramatic and important in the short term, you're thinking about starting over the next few days, then it is possible that you're rushing things, and that there are things that you haven't fully understood. And while Mercury is retrograde, you'll have a chance to reconsider things, and you might reach some new conclusions. And then by the time that Mercury goes direct, you'll be in a better position to really move forward, with whatever your plans are. But as far as today is concerned, I believe you do have a lot to say, and also I think that you can benefit a great deal from other people, because the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, moon in Pisces making a trine to Jupiter in Cancer, and Pisces and Cancer are very sociable signs from a Virgo perspective. So try to work out what other people are doing, and as far as relationships are concerned, there is cause for optimism. You can benefit from the right people, and the right people are there for you, and you don't feel that you're necessarily tied to any one person or one set of plans. It might be that you should be circulating. mixing with different people, even though it is a Monday, a quiet Monday, well, unless you're in France, in which case it's Bastille Day. But with the Moon making a trine to Jupiter, I think that's going to really work in your favour. And do think about the important people in your life, and how you can relate to them over the course of the day, because that Moon Jupiter, it's a lucky aspect, and it's possible that you can get lucky or be lucky with another person's help. And so make sure that your social life is active, and don't dismiss another person. Just because someone in the past has been disappointing doesn't mean they're going to be disappointing today. And don't make assumptions. You might assume that another person just can't be helpful, and so you don't try. You can be quite sort of negative and transactional about it, but okay, sometimes we are negative and transactional, but give people a chance. And I think that there's one person out there who is quite capable of coming up with the goods. Libra, we have a trine between the Moon and Jupiter. It's a great aspect, and this trine can help all of us, regardless of our sign. But as far as you're concerned, this trine is, it sounds very light and easy, Moon trine Jupiter, but as far as you're concerned, it might actually be very practical. It just might allow you to get yourself together, and also to start to think about what you need to do to achieve results. There are things you want to achieve. Okay, in the Northern Hemisphere it might be approaching high summer, but that doesn't mean that everything has to slow down. And with Moon trine Jupiter, people need to know about you, and people need to know about what you can do and what you're planning, and you can really project yourself. And I do think that people will notice, and the Moon's trine to Jupiter allows you to create the right preparations, and you can be very well organized, and you can make sure that everything is in order. And if anything has not been working for you in the past, or has been a bit of a mess, then you can sort it out very quickly, and you can present a very disciplined and organized front, and that is going to be very much appreciated. Additionally, Libra, you are able to think the best of things. And that is important. I always or often talk about negative thinking and positive thinking, and I do believe that in certain cases negative thinking can be very effective, because it creates a vacuum. It creates a possibility of not expecting anything. But that doesn't mean to say that positive thinking is always bad. And today, Libra, I think there is a place for positive thinking. And think about what could go right, not what could go wrong. And this is especially the case when you're talking to people. Be enthusiastic. Don't do yourself down. Don't be too analytical. You might say, well, this is a good idea. I've got this good idea, but I do know that things could go wrong. Concentrate on the positives, and concentrate on the positives about yourself. And this is especially the case if you're in a situation where you're trying to do some self-promotion, and don't be too analytical. And if you are uniformly positive, then I think that people will respond to you very well. And it works both ways. You be positive to other people. Encourage them to make the most of who they are and what they've got, and that's gonna really work very well. And that's how relationships can work. So if you're trying to get someone's attention, or you're trying to placate someone or get someone on your side, just listen to them and see what they're planning, and be very positive about it. And your enthusiasm is going to have an immediate impact. So overall, Libra, it's a day which should ideally be quite sociable. Other people do matter, and also be optimistic about yourself and your own prospects, and also be ready to share that optimism with other people. Scorpio, I think that things look good. Things are running fairly smoothly. I mean, they can run smoothly. That doesn't necessarily mean that they will run smoothly. And so, Scorpio, you might have to ask yourself, well, what could go wrong? Well, what could go wrong could be your own nervousness or your own tension. For some reason, Scorpios are feeling tense. There are things they would like to do, but they're very aware of everything that's holding them back. And you might be of a view that you're in a situation where you're stuck, that there is nothing you can do. And we're talking about your views, how you see the world. We're not talking about objective reality here. And it's therefore the case, Scorpio, that you need to move beyond your own tensions and recognize that the objective reality is good. Things are in place. Moon is in Pisces, Jupiter's in Cancer. That means that Jupiter and the Moon and Jupiter are both making trines to Scorpio, which is of course your sign. And so you need to harness the good feelings relating to that Moon Jupiter trine, thinking about what you are, what you can do, and don't underestimate yourself. There are things that you can do that really can come over as being really rather spectacular with that Moon Jupiter trine. And don't forget, Moon and Jupiter are also in mutual reception. So that does look good. Now, one aspect there is today is a square between Moon and Venus. And that square between Moon and Venus might indicate that some people can be really good for you, they can help you achieve whatever it is you want to achieve, but other people are just not going to be positive. They're going to feed your tension by just saying things that you just don't really want to hear it, or they are maybe just unstable, inconsistent, and they say one thing, then they say the opposite 5 minutes later, and you just don't need that. You don't need that kind of aggravation. So make sure that those kinds of people are not part of your life today. I mean, maybe you can deal with them later, tomorrow or the day after, but not today. And additionally, it's possible that someone who is normally quite reasonable is maybe someone who's very close to you. Today, they just seem annoying. And if someone seems annoying, then stay out of their way. You can come back to them later when the situation has changed. And what you don't want is the opportunities of today being spoilt by another person's comments, criticisms, over-analysis, because that's just going to feed your tension. It's going to make you tense, and if you're tense, your your productivity levels are going to go down, and of course your happiness is going to be adversely affected. So Scorpio, it's a day when there are certain things that you need to avoid, and if you can avoid them, then I think that things should really move, thanks to that wonderful aspect between the moon and Jupiter. Sagittarius, we have the moon in Pisces at the moment, and the moon is making a great aspect to Jupiter, making a trine, and the moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception. They're in each other's signs. So that is certainly great news. But you have to use this moon trine Jupiter in the right way. You have to accept that it's not necessarily a super extroverted day. You don't have to be all over the place. You don't have to make huge efforts to go places. It's just unnecessary. And the best way of using this moon trine Jupiter is to stick to what you know and trust. There are things that are working for you, where you feel comfortable, and that's what you need to concentrate on. It's not a day for experimentation. If you do experiment, or if you try something new, it's not that anything's going to go bad or go wrong. It's just that it could be just a waste of time. So be comfortable, be happy, wherever it is, wherever you are, and the luck will look after itself. And don't allow yourself to be undermined by people who are not on your wavelength. The moon does make a square to Venus as well as making a trine to Jupiter. Now, the moon trine Jupiter, fantastic aspect because they're in mutual reception. But moon square Venus is not necessarily so fantastic. It just could be irritating, and you might be talking about people who they don't mean any harm, but they still manage to just slow you down, and they could diminish your natural enthusiasm. You do have a natural enthusiasm because you're a Sagittarius, and that natural enthusiasm is especially strong today. And that enthusiasm, can work best when it's just focused on yourself and your immediate sphere. You don't have to spread that enthusiasm everywhere. You don't have to be here, there, and everywhere. That, as I've suggested, that is not a good idea. Take what you have and intensify it. Make the most of it, and that might also apply to relationships, but the right kind of relationships. Some relationships are just a waste of time. They're just going to distract you, are going to annoy you. But the right relationships with people who you're very familiar with, they haven't let you down in the past, that will work. And from an emotional view, you are quite emotional at the moment, Sagittarius, and you have an opportunity to really understand how other people are working and how other people are thinking about things and their sort of inner motivations and their hopes and their fears, and you can tune into all of that. And you don't have to go anywhere to be able to get into another person's heart, maybe. And so you are sensitive, and you can use that sensitivity, and it just supports the idea that you if you get it right today, then things could be really fantastic. But don't allow yourself to be tempted. You really do not have to be an extrovert. I know that Sagittarians have a reputation for being extroverts, but not today. You've got it all sorted out right where you are, and there's no need for excessive movement. Capricorn, you are able to deal with most things. certainly on an intellectual level, and your ability to communicate is going to be great. Lots of things you can say, and the things you say will really make a lot of sense. And additionally, it's a great time for getting through to people. So if there's someone you've been trying to get in contact with, now might be your chance. Your words will hit home, and at the same time you'll just know how to behave, and your sensitivity will be obvious. And that is because the moon is making a trine to Jupiter, and don't forget that Jupiter is in Cancer, which is your opposite sign. And additionally, you can present yourself, whoever you are, whatever kind of person you are, it's going to be obvious. There's no need to hide anything, and you can present yourself in a very clear and quite disciplined way, and people will just understand it, and you'll have little difficulty establishing your authority. But authority, you don't really have to establish authority. It's not really a day when you have to be in control or excessively in control, because you'll just know what to say, and you in most cases, in most situations, you will get your way, and you shouldn't feel that you have to do anything on your own, because with the moon making a trine to Jupiter, that indicates that there are a lot of people out there who are going to be working in your favor, once they understand what you want, and also you need to understand what they want. So it's a great day for talking, but it's also a great day for listening. And by listening to someone, with your heart and your mind, then you can have a really good understanding of who this person is, and what they're all about. So Capricorn, that's about it. It's a day when you can you can be yourself, and you can communicate in a way that's also very effective. And don't forget to listen to other people, because people they've not just got things to say, but they could help you out. It really is possible. Aquarius, don't forget the material dimension of things. Sometimes Aquarians can try to be aloof and objective, and also they don't want to be contaminated by the everyday cares of our mundane existence. So for some Aquarians, the issue of money might be rather sort of unseemly. You don't want to get your hands dirty with it. Though today, with the moon in Pisces making a trine to Jupiter, possibly the financial side of things should not be ignored. And you don't have to take it too seriously. You just have to be open to possibilities. And with moon trine Jupiter, there's a chance, if you get yourself together, that you can sort something out in a financial sense. So it's a new week, it's a Monday, and the moon's in Pisces, and so money does matter, and you can talk to someone about money, you can talk to people about money, and you will come over as being very reasonable. And additionally, if money is available, then you can actually put yourself in a position where you can get hold of the money. You don't have to use force. You don't even necessarily have to use persuasion. There may be a certain amount of luck there, but you have to do the groundwork. You have to create a situation where the money can actually appear. So a bit of organization would not go amiss. And you could say that money and organization is what a lot of what the day should be about. Though, additionally, as far as other people are concerned, I mean, other people seem to have things to say. They have strong opinions, and they have strong opinions about the world and what's happening. And some people really are very effective communicators, and you may be influenced by effective communicators. That may not necessarily be people you know. It could be politicians and other commentators on YouTube, for example. You listen to what they say and you think, oh, well, that sounds reasonable. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. We sometimes do need to get alternative opinions, and you should certainly get alternative opinions, but you should be careful about sort of taking them at face value. You think, Aquarius, that you're very independent-minded, and you're not going to be persuaded to do anything you don't want. But consider the possibility that you can be persuaded, whether it's by people on YouTube, whether it's YouTube videos, or whether it's just people you know. People have a way right now of getting under your skin and showing you a different approach and showing you a different way of looking at the world. And so maybe a good thing. Maybe you need a change of view, but don't take what people say at face value, because some people might be deceptive. Pisces, moon is in your sign. That is certainly good news. And with the moon in your sign, it's making a trine to Jupiter. So Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter rules Pisces. The moon and Jupiter are in mutual reception to one another. So logically, that means that today should be really good, and things should just move. There's a flow to today, and if you want to make the most of a flow, you need to make sure that you are in control. It's you taking the initiative. You don't have to just give in to another person's flow, just not have any opinions, just go where the tide goes. That's not what it's about. You can create the flow, and you can initiate things, and it will all be very straightforward, very easy. Things will just happen. And additionally, you know in your heart that things are going to work out. You have an underlying optimism to you, and so when you think about what could happen, well, there's a very good chance that it will happen. And that means, Pisces, that you can actually be quite an exciting person. People want excitement. Now they want excitement. Sometimes they are just not receptive, but they are receptive right now, and you're helped by that moon trine Jupiter. So if you've got ideas, something you want to express, then don't hold on to them. Make them happen, and that might mean just talking about them, telling people about how you want things to be. And I think in many cases people will listen. But even if there's no one around, your ideas and your enthusiasm and yes, your optimism, can make a big difference. And so even if you're working on something that doesn't involve other people, you can really make it happen. It might be just some task you're doing at home, for example. It doesn't need anyone's help. You weren't too sure whether it was going to work out, but yes, it can work out. And this is a time, Pisces, where you just have a lot of ideas. Your ideas are really flowing, and you don't want anyone to interrupt those ideas. Okay, not everyone is going to be enthusiastic. There are a couple of people who could be excessively negative, will dwell on the worst case scenario. Well, it's always good to be aware of a worst case scenario, but in most cases that worst case scenario doesn't have to be worried about at the moment. You need to, you need to be positive, and you need to allow your ideas to work their way through, and you really create something. And most people are going to pick up on that excitement, and they will regard you as someone who can perhaps set a good example, being positive, being enthusiastic, but they might also regard you as someone who is worth following, because it does seem that you're special. And so, make the most of that specialness while it lasts. Well, I won't say while it lasts, you're always special, but it's just that right now you are extra special. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it is now time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 52, which is keeping still. So with this hexagram, we see the image of two mountains, one over the other. So it's a double hexagram in the sense that you've got two trigrams repeated, and so keeping still, keeping still, and there are no moving lines. So that really does emphasize the point that it is about keeping still. So if you're planning on moving anywhere, doing anything dramatic, then perhaps you should think again. There's just not much point. And if you want to make the most of things, just observe. You don't have to be in the center of things. And actually, that's something I've been telling a lot of people when I've gone through the 12 signs. And, I do understand that we have a trine aspect between the moon and Jupiter today. Moon in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer. It's a great aspect. And you might think that might encourage one to do stuff. But it's moon in Pisces, moon in Cancer. This is not necessarily a very active trine. And perhaps if you want to really make the most of it, this moon trine Jupiter, regardless of your sign, it's just best to keep still and just look at what's happening around you and decide, what is your next move. And maybe there's also a connection with the fact that Mercury is getting ready to go retrograde. On Friday, Mercury goes retrograde. And so as Mercury slows down, we might feel that we also should be slowing down and reflecting. Now, this hexagram has no moving lines. So it is stuck, it is locked. And so regardless of what this hexagram is about, when you've got a locked hexagram, that does indicate not much activity. Okay, you might try to be active, but what are you going to accomplish? And the answer might be not a great deal. And that's not a problem. We can't accomplish things, every single day. And as far as the nuclear hexagram is concerned, the hexagram in the middle of this hexagram, if we take the trigram, the second, third, and fourth lines, and we take the fourth, fifth, and sixth lines to get the nuclear hexagram, we get hexagram number 40, which is deliverance. And deliverance and keeping still, there's a sort of a connection there, isn't there? There is a problem with deliverance. I mean, this hexagram deliverance is not really about what today is about, but it's more giving us some background. And deliverance may indicate something bad which we can avoid. And sometimes if we want to avoid something, we need to keep still. And if we keep still, we are not noticed, and whatever we're trying to avoid, this monstrous force stamping around, and it's we're just terrified it's going to get us, but it just moves on. It doesn't notice us because we're keeping still. And isn't that how you're supposed to deal with dinosaurs? Was that in that film Jurassic Park? I mean, I did actually get to see that film once. I don't really watch many films, but in Jurassic Park, if I remember, there's a scene where those two children were told to keep still by the dinosaur expert, and if they keep still, the dinosaur won't notice them. And so the dinosaur just passes by or can't see them. And so maybe it's rather like that. If we keep still, no one's going to notice us. And so that might provide a context for it, especially if you're feeling worried about something. Maybe you're afraid that someone's going to tell you something you don't want to hear, or that your misdemeanor might be noticed, or it could just be some negative thought, some negative force stamping around, trying to cause harm. And yeah, if you keep still, then there's a good chance that you can avoid it. So that's the best approach for today. I don't feel that there's anything that has to be done. And now I want to look at France. You know, when I look at France, I must sort of give you the usual warning. Obviously, I'm not French. I don't speak French. Well, not to any great level. In fact, when I was at school, I did have to learn French between the ages of between 7 and 16. I had to learn French, and in spite of all those years learning French, 4 or 5 classes a day sometimes, didn't make any difference. I think the problem is I'm not a linguist. So that's one thing about me in France. And French politics, I find French politics very interesting, but I don't know anything about them. I mean, I don't know much about them. So if you are French or you know about French politics, forgive my ignorance. But I thought, as it is July the 14th, as it is Bastille Day, the celebration of the storming of the Bastille, okay, there is a view that it's not the celebration of the storming of the Bastille. Actually, it's the celebration of the storming of the Bastille. There is some technical point you can make about what exactly is being celebrated on July the 14th, but I would take the view that that moment when even though it was pretty much empty, it was of symbolic value. It was still of symbolic value, and it is remembered. And so I think that date, July the 14th, and the surrender of the fortress, are really of quite major importance in terms of the astrology. So let's look at the chart of the storming of the Bastille, or not the storming of the Bastille, the surrender of the Bastille. So here is where is it? I make it 5:30. I mean, I looked. No, that's a French surrender to the Germans in 1940. That's not what I was looking for. I was looking for the surrender of the Bastille on July the 14th, 1789, which is at 5:30, which I think it took place at around 5:30 p.m. And so, thinking about this chart, there is a question: is anything happening, right now? And of course, Mars was in Gemini at the time of the storming of the Bastille. So Mars was at 8 degrees Gemini. So in a more sort of longer term level, Uranus moving into Gemini could be of importance to France. I mean, it's like the United States. If we take this 5:30 chart, then you've got Sagittarius rising. The United States has got Sagittarius rising, and you've got Gemini on a descendant. And so Uranus is moving into Gemini, and soon enough it will make a conjunction to Mars. Now, that conjunction to Mars is not going to take place this year. I believe, off the top of my head, it takes place in 2027. But it is a note for the future. And with Uranus moving into Gemini, it could destabilize things further as far as France's foreign relations are concerned. Now, already things are difficult with Macron getting totally obsessed about Ukraine and wanting to send troops to Ukraine, and there may be other parts of the world that France could get obsessed about. France wants to hold on to everything it's got, and likes to project its power on a global stage, which is hard work because France isn't quite what it was. But that's one thing going on. And of course, we got Pluto moving into Aquarius. Now, Pluto moving into Aquarius long term for France is a very big deal, because it means that we're in the run up to France's Pluto return. So France, at the time of the storming of the Bastille, had Pluto at 18 degrees 35. So Pluto's now in Aquarius, and Pluto is stationary, but it got quite close to making the opposition to Venus and Uranus. So there is a Venus-Uranus conjunction in France's in the Bastille chart, and so Pluto has started to activate it. Pluto's now going away because it's going retrograde. But next year, Pluto will go stationary again, and next year we will have Pluto on opposition Venus, opposition Uranus. So that's a note to the future. It's also, we've got Saturn and Neptune in Aries. Next year, Saturn will be on France's moon. You can see there is France's moon, 14 Aries. I think that is quite descriptive of France. I mean, France, but the moon is the people, isn't it? And so when you think about the storming of the Bastille, when you think about the people storming the Bastille, that's moon in Aries, and so that may be hard coded into the French chart, into what it means to be means to be French and French society. The people on the streets, that they have an influence, and we think about French history. You think about the Paris Commune and the Paris 1968, when all the students and workers were on the street. You wouldn't kind of have that in the UK, for example. So with Saturn crossing the moon next year, that's something we need to look out for. And at the moment, we don't hear so much about civil unrest, at least not in the news. We don't hear about the yellow jerseys or whatever they were, but next year things could start to pick up in France in terms of popular unrest. And this is not the only chart one can use for France. One can also use the chart for the Fifth Republic, because France changes its constitution every now and then, and so the chart for the Fifth Republic is, I've set this for October the 6th, 1958. So Nick Campion, in his book on mundane astrology, suggests this chart. Now, there was a referendum on the Fifth Republic, and so you could take a chart for the referendum result, but apparently there was a particular seal that was fixed onto the result. It was a final acknowledgement that this was the new system. And so the chart that in mundane astrology, that in the book that Charles Harvey, Michael Bagent, and Nick Campion wrote on mundane astrology, this is a chart they give. So I'm going to sort of go with this chart for the time being. And we think about Uranus moving into Gemini. Uranus had just moved into Gemini. And so we already saw that at the time of the storming of the Bastille, Mars was at 8 Gemini. So the Fifth Republic has its Mars at 2 degrees Gemini. So Uranus is actually getting very close to a conjunction with Mars. It doesn't get all the way there. It gets to within about a degree of Mars before it goes retrograde. So very relatively soon, Uranus will go retrograde. It will, and then sort of next year it will having turned direct, it will make the full conjunction with Mars. At the same time as Saturn is on the IC of the Bastille chart. So that Uranus conjunct Mars may additionally say something about foreign affairs. It could be about Ukraine again, although the indications are that France may not be really wanting to push itself until next year, when Uranus sort of goes direct and Saturn goes on the IC. But we'll have to see. And France, if we take that chart, I've gone for 6:42 p.m. has 26 degrees Aries rising. Now that means that Charon is running across France's ascendant. It's quite close to France's ascendant, and so that might mean something. It might be about how the country presents itself, trying to be different, trying to be relevant, but there seems to be some wound that is coming to the surface, and that wound could be about sort of loss of empire, loss of influence. I mean, France has taken quite a beating in North Africa. It wanted to sort of control the uranium industry, and so that might be one way of doing it. But also, France wants to be different, and that could be how Charon on the ascendant is working. Now we can take this Fifth Republic chart and we can do solar arc directions for it. So we take the solar arc directions for the Fifth Republic for today. So this would be about moving all of the planets 60 or 67 degrees, because the Fifth Republic it's been around for some time now. It's probably getting ready for a Sixth Republic now, isn't it? I mean, I think people have already started to talk about the Sixth Republic. I think part of the problem with the Fifth Republic is that it gives the presidency too much power, and we're seeing that with Macron. Of course, it was de Gaulle's idea, the Fifth Republic, and so these presidential elections are important. Of course, we got those in a couple of years' time, and solar arc directed Chiron is at 24 degrees 58 Aries, and so Chiron, it has its natal Chiron at 17, 18 Aquarius. So we do have a double Chiron feel. So we're getting a real sense of what it means for Chiron to be on the ascendant here with France. And is France trying to do things differently? I mean, that might be one way it's working. And Jupiter and Neptune. So there's a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in the horoscope of the Fifth Republic. And so by solar arc direction, that conjunction is moving onto the midheaven. So if you take the Fifth Republic's midheaven of 1141 Capricorn, Jupiter has already crossed the midheaven. Jupiter, that might be Jupiter himself, Emmanuel Macron, and having fantasies about what he can achieve, how he can use his power. But now Neptune's on the midheaven, and this might indicate that the presidency is in a state of overreach. The president is trying to play all sorts of Neptunian games, and one wonders how successful he's being. And the exact aspect we have at the moment is solar arc directed Mercury is conjunct the Fifth Republic Saturn, as solar arc directed Mercury on Saturn. So maybe this is about a realization that in the country that something is not working, that something has to change, and it could be sort of bad news. Mercury, solar arc directed Mercury on the Saturn could be bad news about the economy. The economy may not be working. Well, I don't think it is working. It's not special to France. I mean, by the sound of it, the British economy is even worse. And so there are some important solar arc directions going on there. And then there is the horoscope of Emmanuel Macron. And of course, I've looked at Emmanuel Macron, his horoscope, quite a few times. And so here is Macron's chart. And Macron has survived. I mean, like every pressurized West European leader, pressurized at home, he's putting as much effort as possible into foreign affairs, sort of strutting around the international stage, Ukraine, going to America, trying to come over as being an important person, going to London to patronize Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is, of course, an incredibly weak prime minister, and we're really seeing that, and we're seeing how it's quite embarrassing for British national pride to see Starmer fawning to Macron. It's bad, but I know I'm not talking about Britain. I'm talking about France here, and so you've got Sun Mercury. So Macron has this Sun Mercury conjunction in Sagittarius, and Saturn and Neptune have just gone across it quite recently. And he kind of has survived, in a manner of speaking. Now, Saturn and Neptune will both go retrograde. They're already retrograde. So both Saturn and Neptune will leave Aries and go back into Pisces. And so that means they will make squares to Macron's Sun and his Mercury. And so those squares are going to be starting, certainly for Neptune. Neptune will be starting to hit those planets in November. Saturn even earlier. So Saturn goes back into Pisces at the beginning of September. So in September, Macron will have to deal with Saturn square his Sun Mercury conjunction again. So he's going to be given problems by Saturn and Neptune, and that suggests to me that the situation of him making mistakes, making poor calculations, will continue sort of later in the year, and he may make some sort of quite disastrous decisions. I mean, he already has. And look at Macron's Saturn. His Saturn is at 0 degrees Virgo. So Uranus is making the square to his Saturn, and Saturn represents sort of his boundaries. I mean, he is something of a control freak. So Uranus square his Saturn it's events upsetting his boundaries. And look at his IC. He's got his IC at 2921 Taurus. So Uranus has crossed his IC. Uranus goes retrograde, so Uranus will actually cross his IC again later in the year. So Uranus is slowly undermining him, sort of messing things up. But the question is, when are we going to see real problems? So that's something to consider. Now, turning to his Vedic chart. Well, his Vedic chart, I think it's important to look at his Vedic chart, because his Vedic chart gives us a wider perspective on it. And you could argue, if you look at his Vedic chart, that things have temporarily improved for him. And so here's a Vedic chart, and so with Macron, he is in his Rahu Dasha. So remember, in Indian astrology, life gets separated into 9 discrete phases, which if you live through all those phases, it all adds up to 120 years. And Macron's Rahu Dasha started in 2009. And so his Rahu is in the 9th house in his Vedic chart, and it's in Virgo in his Vedic chart. So Rahu in Virgo is exalted in Vedic astrology, and so you could say that his Rahu, his North Node, works pretty well, and that during his Rahu Dasha, he may be untouchable. And we saw the same thing with Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher entered her Rahu Dasha in the early 1970s. I think she was a member of the Heath cabinet in the early 1970s, and her Rahu Dasha continued right the way through until 1990. And within a few months of her Rahu Dasha ending, it all came to pieces. She was no longer Prime Minister, so it unravelled quickly. Now, Margaret Thatcher, she didn't have a fixed term. She could, in theory, have carried on being Prime Minister, provided the electorate supported her. But she had problems with her own party, and it didn't work out. Now, with Macron, his Rahu Dasha finishes on the 27th of July 2027, and so that is a couple of months after the French election, and he will not be. We know that he will not be president there. So in this case, we know how Rahu's going to work. It's okay. Something bad could happen. He could get assassinated, but we mustn't make that assumption. I'm sure he won't get assassinated. His security is good, and to a great extent, he's probably protected, and his luck is protected until the summer of 2027. And so, however bad things appear to be, he has got his role, he's got his slot of time, which he is going to see through. Now, he did go through quite a difficult time from the 15th of February 2024 to January 2025, when he was in his Rahu Mahadasha and his Sun Sabdasha. And his Sun is not particularly fortunate. It's in the 12th house, and his Sun is ruler of the 8th house, and so that period was difficult, but it wasn't difficult enough to stop him becoming president, because you have to think of the wider Dasha ruler, which was the North Node. And so in his Rahu Dasha, he is protected. And then in January 2025, he moved into the Sun Sabdasha ended, and the Moon Sabdasha started. And so this continues until July of 2026. And so it might well be the case that for the next year, Macron will be able to keep things together. I mean, he's got the moon in his Vedic moon, his sidereal moon is in Aries. It's in the 4th house, and I don't think that moon is really under too much pressure. It's quite, by Shadbala, it's quite strong. Saturn is not going to be. Saturn doesn't move into sidereal Aries for some time. Although he is in his Sadisate period of time now. I mean, but Saturn has moved into sidereal Pisces, the sign before his moon, and so the pressure is increasing. But I think that his moon subdasha is probably going to be okay. It's not. It's probably not going to be super disastrous. And then July 2026, in about a year's time, he moves into his Rahu major dasha, Mars subdasha. Now that is different. I think his Mars could be a real problem because he has got Mars in Cancer. Mars is fallen in Cancer. It's not a great Cancer. It's not a great Mars. And okay, that might say something about his relationship with Brigitte. There is evidence, as we saw when she supposedly slapped him as he was coming out of a plane in Vietnam. And so that might be one way it could manifest. But Mars is his enemies. And also the last dasha the last subdasha of a major dasha's period, it can be the time when things start to unravel. And so I think that things will start to really unravel for Macron in July of next year. And that Mars could be very difficult, and I think his enemies really are going to come out of the woodwork there. So I don't think that his presidency is going to end on a fortunate note. So that's something that we really do have to think about. So let's now go back to Western astrology and briefly consider Jourdain Bardella. Jourdain Bardella, he's now increasingly likely to be a presidential candidate in 2027, and so remember, he is very, very young. He's just had his Saturn return. I mean, and so here is hold on, here's Jourdain Bardella's horoscope. He has, you can see he's got quite a Saturn. There's his Saturn and his Sun opposition. So he's going to be 30 in September. I mean, that shows how young he is. And I think Marine Le Pen has basically told him that, after her legal issues, that he's going to be the candidate. I mean, things might change, but and he's got Sun opposition Saturn, and this is hitting his ascendant. So Saturn is now retrograde. Saturn won't go as far as Saturn itself, but Saturn will make an opposition to his Venus. Later in the year, it's already made that aspect. So those are a few thoughts about it. I don't think that it's. I think it's a problem chart. I'm not convinced that he's going to make it as president. I haven't made any forecasts yet. This is not a formal prediction here with Jourdain Bardella, but I do remain unconvinced. Although we have to think about the election in 2027, and that's a chart I wanted to finish with. So here is a chart of the last round of the elections. I believe that polls open in France at 8 o'clock, so I've set this to Paris for April the 25th, 2027. And that chart is quite dramatic. I mean, if it's really worth taking the chart for the opening of the polls on April the 25th, 2027, we do have Uranus on the ascendant. We've got 3 degrees Gemini rising, and we've got Pluto on the midheaven. So if you're looking for an upset, if you're looking for someone like Jourdain Bardella to become president, you could say, well, that might be in the chart. That's suggesting that something's going on here, and it's it's chart. Look at, we've got a Chiron Mercury Sun conjunction there, so which is square Pluto and square the midheaven. So there is real drama here with the 2027 election, and then there's this question of how does it affect the Fifth Republic? And so here's a horoscope of the Fifth Republic. Uranus is conjunct the Fifth Republic's Mars. The ascendant is conjunct the Fifth Republic's Mars, and the Fifth Republic has Mars square Pluto. So this is really perhaps what the Fifth Republic is about. It's about power, the power of the presidency, and also the power of the country. Since 1958, France has done everything it can to project its power. In spite of having lost its colonies, or lost most of its colonies, it's really tried to keep itself relevant on the international stage. And that might be the Mars square Pluto, and the fact that Uranus is aspecting Mars and squaring Pluto does put this whole thing under pressure. And so the election could be an upset. And another thing about the Fifth Republic, which I forgot to mention, is that the Fifth Republic has its Uranus at 15 degrees 24 Leo, and so Mercury right now is moving onto the Fifth Republic's Mercury, and I think it goes stationary. Where does Mercury go stationary? Mercury goes stationary at 1534 Leo. So Mercury goes stationary exactly on the Fifth Republic's Uranus. And so that might say something about France over the next week. I should have mentioned that earlier. So those are a few thoughts about France, and it seemed appropriate because it was Bastille Day. Although I've been quite general about things, and I will be looking at France again. It is an important country. It's a country I find interesting, and we'll see how things work out. But as far as Macron is concerned, I'm just unconvinced that things are too disastrous for him for the next year. Somehow he'll get through, and he'll get through to the end of his term, unless there's something really bad or tragic happens. But by July of next year, I think that's when the problems for Macron really will start, rather like they started for Margaret Thatcher right at the end of her term, right at the end of her Rahu Dasha. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.